all of a sudden I like went back to my own college and NFL career as I'm sitting there imagining walking into the weight room and seeing like the door and then seeing it close and hearing the clapping starting. And that like as I was like picturing that, like the sinking feeling in your stomach where you're like, oh fuck. So if that happens, what happens to the individual who Dawn Patrol?
We had a real basic deal. If you come in after the clapping starts, it was just basically you had 50 up downs and you had to do 50 up downs within 3 minutes. It's just a basic punishment. Again, that was that standard where it didn't change. Like, hey, I'm in a bad mood today. You got 100, or hey, you got the stair climber today because that's what I feel like. It was just they knew, you come in a second late or 5 minutes late. If it's beyond a certain point, we were like, look, you've missed. This is a mess.
You're fucked.
Yeah.
You just need to
leave. You missed. So you come back on Wednesday at 6, make it up, and do a punishment. So I've never seen though, like for me, 50 up downs scare a person more than.
What's ironic about that is in the CrossFit community, people actually voluntarily do up down. They call them burpees.
Yep.
But in football and every other sport, since the beginning of time, up downs are something that are used as punishment.
Yep.
So when I played at Berkeley, we had a head coach or an offensive line coach named Tom Cable, who went on to be head coach of the Raiders. Now he's at the Seattle Seahawks. He was a ruthless motherfucker, like the most ruthless individual I've ever had. And I got into a fight in practice, and as I beat this dude's ass, Tom got pretty mad because there had been too many fighting, and so he decided to make an example of me, and he gave me 800 yards of up-downs, which means that you run, and every 5 yards, you do an up-down, and you keep running. So I had, 5 times, like basically a lot. So it's 100. It was a lot of up-downs. So 800 yards, 2 hours I'm out there in Turlock in the 100-degree heat with full pads doing 800 yards of up-downs. And I remember after 100, he's like, if you do the next 100 real fast, you only have to do one more 100 after that. And my attitude was like, fuck you. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to do them real slow. I'm going to make you sit out here, you fat motherfucker. And, but yeah, that's like, so it always was funny when I came to the CrossFit deal, they're like, 50 burpees for time. And I was like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Like I'm here on time. Nobody's clapping. So no, I was hearing that. And I always, it's so much easier to create vision and culture early on and set the standard than to and then hold that standard than it is to try to establish it later on. And I'm sure you've come into places where they specifically brought you in to establish vision and culture, and maybe a team I played at Cal. I hate SC. And they were always the worst, thugs / even though I played at Berkeley, which was a lot of thugs, but they were like the LA thugs, like the glamour thugs as we used to call them. And I can imagine they were the type of guys where if you got up on them, they were going to take cheap shots and do things. And what was interesting is when you went there, that was like a big culture change. And I remember specifically when you went there, how all of a sudden it became that Pete Carroll hard work. Was it hard to go in there and kind of change that? I remember hearing the SC players couldn't come to practice after Tupac got shot because it was so emotionally damaging. So how does it? True statement.
Well, see, I guess my example with SC was I got to go there twice. So I got to go there when Pete got the job in 2001, and he, was wanting to establish, his culture, and he's such a rah-rah positive guy, but he was really, really hard on the accountability part, when he got in there because he needed to focus on team and focus on playing for each other and practicing hard but having fun too. So that was really neat to see. Again, I was a shot putter, so the whole football culture for me was I was learning as I was going. So that's why I laughed back at Tennessee. I was a GA when we won a title, and I was like, I'm just working the weight room. This is how it is. So the whole learning about football and how there's 11 guys got to execute well to make a play happen, and those things like that. I was like, whoa, this is pretty cool. That's where you got to be very influential on as a shot putter, you're such an individual. I lift, I get stronger, I throw farther. It's you versus a tape measure with the same ball. It's 16 pounds. So there's a direct correlation, whereas football, you can have
You played football early on, didn't
No.
you? You never played football?
I grew up basketball, baseball,
and track.
And then started track late as a high schooler.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
how come mom wouldn't sign the permission slip?
that was it.
So that's like a joke. There's, I don't know, a little bit, but like we used to always make wise ass comments to about a lot of the track dudes who were super fast, real explosiveness. We're like, why do you play football? And it was always like, my mom wouldn't sign the permission slip. So they were like the big strong guys, and like you guys remember his name, but there was a kid that lifted, he's an Olympic lifter, a black kid down south, super strong, like 15, 16-year-old kid, and yes, amazing. And I remember actually somebody made that point. Like the kid, posted up a video, and I was watching. I was like, "This kid's super impressive." And somebody's like, "What's wrong? Mom didn't sign the permission slip." And I died because that was like our joke. Because dude, he's big, strong dude. 600 pounds, 500-pound bench. 290. Explosive guy. We always saw like these guys, and we're like, "Man, how come these dudes don't play football?" And that was the joke. So
my junior year in high school, I got just terrified. I was sitting in class, and the principal had called the teacher to bring me to the office, and I was a junior in high school. So I'm walking to the office going, what have I done? Like, I'm thinking, like, what have I done? Or what they caught me on camera doing something, whatever. So I go in, he's like, sit down. And he's like, as the assistant athletic director at the school, we've all had a committee meeting, and we want to know right now why you're not playing football for us. And I was like,
and you grew up down south, right?
Yeah.
We're in
East Tennessee.
Which is football's an institution.
So as soon as I found out I wasn't in trouble, I was like, all right, well, my mom never would let me play. And they're like, well, you're going to play. You're starting tomorrow. And I was like, all right. So
seems like a good idea.
So it was like, there was like one spring practice left. And I went up there and threw on my pads, and I'm up there like, golly, how do these work, and all this stuff. So I'll go out, and we banged around a little bit, and, and they brought me back to the office next day. So what'd you think? And I'm like, I just want to throw the shot and throw the disc, and they're like, all right, well, we tried, So
nice.
That was my experience. I think I padded up one day.
Yeah, no, it's and then it's interesting too for a lot of people in here, affiliate owners, gym owners. We get this rare opportunity or actually you're kind of in this weird crux of training people that are, just civilians in a lot of ways,
Right.
But then you get these certain athletes that come through the door, and it's almost like, thank God, like now I have somebody where I get to, start working with them, and now this gets to hopefully take them somewhere. And people always ask me like, oh, what are some of your greatest accomplishments? I'm like, I got a host of emails of coaches that we've worked with that have helped kids get scholarships.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, what about your NFL stuff? I'm like, no, that's like to me, one of the best gifts I ever got, and this is getting a scholarship and going. I told you guys this yesterday, that was a huge deal for my dad. With that, I got the chance to go to school and get my school paid for. And so I always look at coaches that can help a young person move along and basically get that same opportunity. Because, as you guys know that have student debt, I remember I paid off my wife's student loans, and she was like so tearful. She's like, I didn't think I was ever going to get out from underneath those.
Yeah.
And for especially for people, like for a lot of guys that come from less disadvantaged places, sports is their way of getting out.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you have this opportunity to go to school and get this degree. And so for me, I always get pissed when guys don't finish their degree.
Yeah.
Or you see a guy like as an NFL player, you get to go play professional sports. And my deal when I talked to a lot of guys was like, do whatever it takes to be the player you need to do so you can get that money and get paid. So then we always talked about something called generational wealth, which is, like you watch guys make $40-50 million a year, or over a course of an NFL career. That's just not their money. They are basically setting their kids and their grandkids and their grandkids, and that becomes generational wealth. So when you hear these dudes blowing like $50 million,
You're like,
I'm like, fuck, you didn't fuck your kids, you fucked your kids' kids. And that's, and in a time when, as you guys heard him give, dude, we had Aaron on our podcast, and at the minute we were like, dude, we got to get him here for a symposium. But have you heard the common theme with Andy and him? He wasn't here for Andy's talk like you guys were, but what was it? It was mentorship, having a plan, accountability. All these things. It's interesting when you start hearing common themes from people from different places that have all had great success. And it was pretty cool. So Ed Cosner,
meat truck,
aka Mr. Triple X, but Ed actually hand delivered that pretty amazing All Blacks jersey. Ed is a world-renowned strength coach and works with the Franks brothers, and we connected and had him on our podcast, another guy, and we invited him to come out and just basically bring good humor and a laugh and his sparkling personality out. And so can you tell people a little bit about you? And
Sig on? Okay, well, basically I grew up lifting. My father was an alternate for the 64 Olympic team. That career ended for him when he got shot during the 67 riots as a cop in Detroit. But I grew up in the YMCA's in Detroit in the 70s. That's where all the heavy lifting was. We had talked about, I went in, kind of copied the old men that were lifting on the platforms. So they took me aside and, look, I'll help you, I'll coach you, but you're gonna load the bar. So I loaded the bar and loaded the bar for 3 old Greek dudes. 2 of them were former Olympians, and that was what my deal was. I had to load and unload the bar for their main lifts. When they moved on to the accessory lifts, it was my turn to start warming up. They moved on to the finish up, they started coaching me. I would finish up my workout, I would run down the street to one of the guys owned a restaurant. I'd go get food for them, take it to the steam room. For some godless reason, they would be in the steam room eating. I'd bring it in, knock on the door. All right, well, you go sit out in the locker room because kids don't come in the steam room, and that's
Probably a good thing,
yeah. It was
especially a bunch of Greek men.
scary ass stuff.
Well, the irony of this is George Zangus, who was the guy that steeped me in the strength game, same exact thing. I trained with a bunch of old Greeks, and that was our similar deal. We had to show up early and rack the weights, and then when they got done, we got to done, and then they would call out for sandwiches because the workouts lasted from like 9 a.m. to like 3 in the afternoon. I know it sounds crazy, but they'd call out for sandwiches and then drink coffee, and so they'd give you this coffee that was like sludge,
Oh, geez, yeah.
and they had to drink it, and I'm over there. I didn't drink coffee for most of my adult life because I thought it was this dark sludge thing that made my heart race so fast. I thought I was having a heart attack. So it's funny, like we were connecting on the same story. I was like, you too with the Greeks? So weird.
Yeah, so I actually went in the military just to get out of Detroit and spent my time, but I started powerlifting and playing rugby in the Army. Took my Army education money. Sorry about the college thing, guys, but I put it in my pocket and went to England to chase girls with accents and play rugby. Became a professional rugby player at the very beginning of the era of professional rugby, so which means I made about as much money to cover my beer tab at the end of a season. Some years not. So, but realized later that I needed to go to college if I wanted to strength coach. So, started in college, started coaching at UTSA, which is University of Texas at San Antonio. They didn't have a program. I was going to school full time, coaching full time, and waiting tables at a bar called Dick's Last Resort on the Riverwalk in San Antonio.
I actually know that place.
Yeah. Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 hours or stay, up till 3 o'clock in the morning, still making it to school at 6 a.m. for workouts. Don't know how I did it, but moved on to Baylor as a graduate assistant. And somehow I ended up with the San Antonio Spurs where I won a couple of championship rings. That's why it was funny when you were saying that. When I interviewed, I didn't really have a philosophy yet. I did, but just didn't realize it. But for me to interview, it was like, well, I've got these 2 NBA championship rings. I should have the job. Look at that, I got these, and it didn't work out that way. So, but I've been doing private work probably for the last 15 years, and went down to New Zealand to coach with a friend of mine with a team down there, and ended up staying. Now I coach 7 guys from the New Zealand All Blacks rugby, and quite a few guys from around the world, all within the same kind of group, all within call it the Tight 5. Which would be guys my size, well, your height, maybe leaner, skinnier, but the guys that make up the scrum, the guys that make up the workhorse. So that's it. That's all I really do. I own a gym down in Houston and lift weights and have fun. God, that's my job.
Sounds like a pretty good job to me.
I like
So let's open up for some Q&A for Double A or Ed or John or whatever. Anybody have any questions from the talk? Yeah,
covered
buddy, here
everything.
it come.
We covered it
Double
all.
D, you're up.
So, question on culture of, I'll stand up so you can see me. Coming in if you are coming in as a strength coach to a new program, I feel like it's probably a little bit easier to implement your culture, your coaching philosophy. how might we as gym owners who we have a staff, we have a culture that's already established that it's not necessarily what we want. What are some steps that you suggest to start to change that?
This for me.
Yeah. Or all three of you guys. I mean, y'all have great.
Again, that setting is something I'm probably not as familiar with. I think any athlete or any person you work with, they want accountability. You just got to start structuring it for them. I think, anybody wants someone to put structure in their life. So I'm thinking as a gym owner and your staff, if it's, again, you kind of come into an area where things have already been established, but maybe you don't agree with them so much, or you're trying to make them better or more your way. I think that's where you have to start, just start talking, start communicating with them, with your staff, with the people that come in and train, and start making your message clear. It could be as simple as maybe putting your mission statement or whatever it is, that it's out there. Maybe it's either with social media. Now you can start influencing your message through that. Those things are, now again, the power of mentoring it's so easy now between the things you can do. So text messages, social media, and those things. And the big thing you can do too, I think, is if you have a saying or a culture that you're trying to establish. If you put it in your above the water fountain, or you put it on the wall when they walk in, or it's on the glass, whatever it is, you have to reference it all the time. If not, it's just a sign. And if you think about that, if you put something up and it says, "We work here with passion," and you put that over the water fountain or whatever it is, but if you never reference that, and if you never talk about that with your staff or with the people that you train, it's just a sign. It's just a sign that hangs there. It means nothing to them. So there's things you got to do. I mean, I think the best thing is there's a speed limit sign everywhere you go, if you think about it. If I'm going back up to Redondo today, or actually Pasadena, because we have soccer, the speed limit most of the way up is going to be 70 miles an hour. Well, I'm probably going to go about 78 until I see a what? A cop, right? Then the sign becomes important, right? So think about that. You can hang something up, but if you never reference it, if you never talk about it, how can you say, well, they're just not buying into my mission, because you never talk about your mission. So
I wrote a blog post on this years ago. It was called Vision and Culture. A guy hit me up, similar deal. I have this gym. I want to change the culture. I don't really like the direction it's going. And the guy went through this whole email about, like, he owned this place and it was what he wanted to do, but like nobody was buying in, and what should he do? And as I thought back, all the places that I was at where they tried to have a culture change with either a new coach or whatever, the first thing they do is they gutted the weight room. They literally got rid of it. Even if it was new equipment, they gutted it. And I know that's probably not feasible, but they painted it, they changed the colors, they changed the floor, they gutted it, almost like out with the old. And so when people walked in, they saw a change, and instantly that message was a different message. And you can ask Aaron any place he's been, and he's laughing about it because he knows.
Great story.
He walks in and hey, you know what? We just paid Sornex, $7 million to build us this brand new weight room. Strength coach, head coach gets fired. You know what? They call Sornex back and they're like, we need the same stuff, but we need it in a different color, and we need it. And they literally gut it. They throw it all away, and they bring in new stuff. They put new stuff on the wall, and so when the players walk in, all of a sudden, like your old shorts and all shirts and all your shoes, all gone. All of a sudden, there's new stuff in your bag, and you were like, where'd all my stuff go? And you got this new stuff, and you like put it on, you walk in, and you're like, wait a minute, is this our weight room? And there's like new stuff on the wall, new equipment, everything's new. Strength coach, I mean, it's literally like, here's our message, this is who we are, and you're like, sounds good, let's go. Because like you said, man, people want accountability, they want leadership. Now I was thinking, like, as I relayed that story, I mean, ironically, there's like 250 Talk to Me Johnnies about all this stuff, and it just makes me laugh that like these things are so centralized, but how do you do that in a commercial or a CrossFit setting? I think what you do is you either rearrange everything, you paint the place, you adjust the equipment, you move it on the other side, you do something, change the entrance, something different, so that when they walk in, what's different. I mean, get new equipment, throw old equipment away, get new play. I mean, something that changes it, paint the place. Maybe, everybody that's here today, you get a free T-shirt that says, with what you want your mission statement to be in. And it's like every day you wear that shirt, you get, I don't know, a free kill cliff or something. I mean, I don't know. I mean, anything that you can do to establish change in that day. And then you go to your people like, in a collegiate or professional place, there's always veteran leaders. There's the guys that like he knows that he can talk to as almost like if you think about the military, you have high-ranking enlisted guys that work. The chiefs work with the enlisted guys, and the chief talks to the commander or the officer. Similar deal. In a collegiate professional setting, the strength coach usually talks to his veteran leaders who they get on the younger guys. Same thing, I think, in our CrossFit setting. If you can have people that are established gym members or even in your place that are setting the tone and you talk to those people, all of a sudden that becomes another arm for you. And I think just being able to, start attacking it from different ways, and they start hearing the message from four sides, I think you can really change the culture. And I wrote that blog post. The guy did it, and then he hit me back like 6 months later that he literally gutted the whole place. The place had been dark. He put lights in, he changed it, and the members walked in and they saw a change. They saw him change, and he spun a different message. And he said it ended up being very, very successful for him. So you said a funny story?
Yeah, I had a really funny story. I got to Ole Miss in 2005, and I got there on a Friday night. I flew from Idaho and landed in Memphis and got picked up by the strength coach and got in on Friday night, and I got settled, and the head football coach calls me. He's like, "Do you make it in town?" "Yeah, we need to meet first thing in the morning." So this is now Saturday morning. So he takes me to breakfast, and I'm sure I knew he was wanting to go over. It's a guy I worked with in the past, so I knew who he was. So, we had breakfast, and he's like, first thing he said, he's like, and the weight room was brand new. The place was 4 months old. He said, "I want you to rearrange the weight room, move everything to a different spot, change it, reverse it, mirror whatever you want to do, but I need it ready for Monday morning, for the training Monday morning." So I knew I had to get a program in the computer. I had to get names, maxes, body weight charts, all those things that I thought I was going to be doing all weekend. And now I've got to rearrange a huge 10,000 square foot weight room, and I don't have help. So
Let's go to Home Depot and pick up some guys. That's what I would have done. I've been like, I got to pick up. Let's get some dudes from Home Depot.
So the best was my buddy that he was on one of those slides, my financial advisor, about the stock and the Clorox. He was in Nashville. He's like, "Hey, I hadn't seen the guy in forever. He's a teammate of mine." He's like, I want to come down and hang out. I'm like, I actually need a little help. He's like, "For what?" I'm like, "We just got to move a few things in the weight room." And he goes, "Oh, that's cool. We can do that and hang out and then go out." And so anyway, we started about 8:30 on Saturday. Or it was just right after that morning I had breakfast. We started, and he got in town probably around 11. We were moving stuff all day up until 9 o'clock that night. And he's a big dude that's strong, but he's been sitting behind a desk for about 10 years. And still lifted weights a little bit. His hands were locked like this, and we're trying to
The monkey claws.
So we go, yeah.
the monkey claws.
So we're in Oxford, Mississippi. So we finish. He's exhausted. He swore he lost like 8 pounds that day. We go to a gas station to get some beer just to cool down and make it a night at the hotel. Well, we find out that the beer in Oxford, they don't sell it cold. All the beer is sold warm, even at gas stations or wherever. You can only buy it at a restaurant cold. So we're like, what the heck's going on? So we bought a bag of ice. We go back to the hotel room. We put the beer in the sink, put the ice on top. We were both so exhausted. We said, well, let's watch TV for 5 minutes, let the beer get cold. Both of us passed out.
The ninja blow dart.
Yeah. The next day, he wakes up, drives back to Nashville, and then like 4 days later in the work week, he's still calling, going, "Man, I can still barely open my hands," because he had to move so much stuff. It was hilarious. Yeah.
Ooh, prank caller.
But yeah, same thing. The players came in that Monday, and they're coming in to weigh in, and they're looking around like, well, something's different in here, And we didn't get to change the equipment. We just moved it around, just put it in a different spot. So.
Yeah, no, I saw that as like a universal at every place I want. Like they want to change the culture. You start with it's like you go buy a house. I'm sure you guys have all bought a used, older house or whatever. What's the first thing you do? You paint it, just because the smell of paint's better than somebody else's smell. You change the toilets, you start changing all the fixtures and everything, and next thing you know, it starts looking like your place. And that's, I mean, one of the hardest things to do is change that vision and culture. The minute, and he talked about it earlier, like the poisoning of the water, because as you know, man, like even the best, most successful coaches, all of a sudden, like it's a weird deal. Like all of a sudden, somebody in the front office or like at the top or starts losing faith in you. And all of a sudden you're like looking around and people are treating you different. You're like, wait a minute, you used to say hi to me. What's going on around here? And you're like, and I saw it from both sides. I mean, my last year in Kansas City, I started 16 games and all of a sudden like the trainer's treating me different. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, oh, nothing. He can tape you. I'm like, oh shit, I see what's going on. It's the end of my career here, and then you go on, you keep playing, but it's in an environment like the NFL or college or whatever. I mean, those guys are there to do a job. I mean, you guys are in a situation where people are actually paying you like, one-on-one, but I think it's no different, and what he talked about is spot on for you guys as well. No.
Back me up. Double A. So you say guys come in and want to check out the workouts at SC and stuff, and they miss the connection between the passion and love, right? And they're like, how do you get your guys to do that? Why do you think these coaches can't make that connection? And when you send them away, just like all these people here, maybe they they're reinvigorated. They want to get that fire burning in the belly. What are some tips and tricks, some steps, some best practices, some boxes to tick to start that process over? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that was the one that, again, that probably was confronted with me the most, is like, we don't have the energy in the weight room. We don't, I watch your coaches coach, like, our coaches don't coach like that. And like, how do you get them to coach like that? And I think it kind of all starts with, again, for me, I got to hire people. So I knew, the type of people I wanted to hire to come in and coach with me. But I think you guys leaving here, you got to start asking yourself, like, what do I really love to do? And if it's like, hey, I really love to draw, but I think this coaching stuff's cool, then maybe go draw. That's your passion. If your passion is lifting weights and getting strong, and then also helping other people, they will know that. As a staff, we always, like during lunch or downtime, we were always training together as a staff in the weight room. Our players come in and grab a banana, whatever. They saw the strength staff lifting weights. They saw the strength staff cleaning. They saw the strength staff squatting. They saw the strength staff pushing the prowler. They saw us training together and supporting each other as if we were coaching each other and things like that. So our athletes were getting those things because they saw a passionate staff. That's where you have to go back and kind of break down yourself and do a little self-evaluation of, why, I want to be a coach, but why? Is it my passion? And if it's not, there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe find what is your passion. Whatever you love to do is what you'll be successful at. I was a senior in high school, sitting in class about 200 pounds, maybe 205, been lifting now for going on 4 years. I was physically bigger than everyone else. Those 4 years of lifting weights made a physical change in me. We're in history class, and Mr. Lynch was our teacher. It's, I don't know, middle of semester. And he starts talking, and everybody's got their book out. And he said, hey, class, shut your book. Everybody shuts their book. He's like, let's just talk. And I was like, wow, where's this going? And he says, he goes, you're graduating, you're seniors, you're about to graduate. What do you love to do? So let's not talk about history today. Let's talk about your future. What do you love to do? What's your passion? What's something you just love to do? And I'm going to tell you, whatever that is, go start pursuing a career in it. And it's so funny. He called me out, and he's like, let's take Mr. Ausmus, and he pointed me out, and he's like, I can tell he likes to lift weights. And I think you all know he does, and everybody, you can see.
You noticed? Thank God. Fuck. Yes. Finally, somebody noticed.
Yeah. So yeah.
He's like, oh.
Yeah. But he said, when he finished it with like, he goes, I would suggest to you, he's like, he was like, I suggest to you that you find some line where you work in that field. And at that time, I didn't know it'd lead to coaching. I didn't know whatever it would lead to. I didn't know it'd lead to being at the time a Division I shot putter at the time. But my passion of lifting weights when I started at 15 it put me right here in front of you right now, if you think about it. So that's your own self-evaluation of what you want to become. You don't have to have energy in the weight room to be effective. I've seen some really good weight room programs go on. Music's not on. Coaches are coaching more training hall, more talking to the athletes. And that's their program, and it works. We responded with, hey, we're going to teach, but when it's time to start hitting sets and reps, we get the music on a little bit. The coaches get a little excited. The players, we felt, would feed off that. The downside to that, I'm going to tell you as a coach, was you had to bring that every day because they look for it. So as a staff, if it's a Friday, you're in week 8 of the winter program, you're like, fuck, I need 2 rock stars today. Because we've been going every day getting these players to work hard, and they're looking to us to give it to them one more day on a Friday. You're just like, man, here we go, and you're sleeping in you're trying to sleep in on the weekend because you're just trying to catch up because you've just, your tread's running really bald at this time on your tire. So again, there's ways to do it without, being so crazy energetic in the weight room. You just got to find what works for you. If you're more of a teacher and instructor, music low, it can work.
You mentioned that you do online programming for a lot of your athletes. How do you get that energy to transfer? How do you keep them accountable? And how do you let what you do in the weight room transfer to that when they're alone or training in their garage or wherever?
Well, technically, I don't do any online programming. All I do is write some messages on a piece of paper and post it. But
He should just I think he forwarded him our link. He's like, just check out those power
yeah,
athlete guys.
just check it. No, I mean, for me, it kind of started again a while back. Was my whole life I've always written something on a piece of paper. That's always I think I get that from my mom because she always had a note. Well, it wasn't a note; it was a list. A list of stuff to do every day, especially in the summer when you have your summer off. And we grew up in a small town in Tennessee, so me and my brother were home all day while my parents went to work. And we were like 8 years old, like, all right, we're here. My grandmother lived next door. Thankfully, she kind of kept a watch on us, but we'd wake up every morning and there was a note. There was a list of things to do. And it was, hey, vacuum the house, make all the beds, take out the garbage, sweep the porches, check the mail. I mean, it was every day you had a routine. And literally it might have took 30 minutes, but I kind of just saw like that was our structure. So I think I kind of took after that later when I started training is, I would be down in my high school years with a piece of paper and a plan written out. And, when I got to college, I had a strength coach that held the plan like I talked about. And I decided to look to him. He'd be like, hey, put 180 on the bar. Okay, put 210 on the bar. How many? 6. Okay. How many of this? 8, whatever. I followed his plan. And then once I started becoming a GA and becoming a coach, the head strength coach and assistants would format the programs for football and stuff. So that was where I was getting creative and start writing my own plans, writing them out on a piece of paper and trying some things, trying a bench program, trying a squat program that's different maybe than I did as an athlete. And I kind of used myself as a guinea pig to learn things about training. So going to SC with Chris Carlisle, he was a huge speed guy, and he didn't put a lot of his emphasis and thought into the weight room side. So he kind of left that up to me because he knew that was real important to me, getting guys strong. So I would always try to be 6 months ahead of the program. So I would write a bench press routine and then the auxiliary movements or squatting and kind of try it on myself, bring that back to him and go, hey, you know what? I really had improvements here. And he would say, well, let's try it with the football program. Let's move it over to that. And those are really the ways I've learned to, always write programs, try different things. So ever since then, I've always written stuff down. And this came up, I don't know, about a year ago. Bert Soren was in town, and I had I had right on my counter, I had something I'd done the day before, and he looked at it and he's like, whoa, that's a lot of squatting. That's a lot of this, and that's a lot of that. I'm like, yeah. He goes, that's pretty cool how you write it down still. I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm old school, and there's all these apps out there now to do strength training with or whatever. And that's where I kind of created that pen and paper strength app. Was like, I just started writing down a daily plan, and people were like, they didn't understand that the plan I wrote, I'd already done it. I was usually a day or a week ahead of what I was putting out. So I knew when they had any questions, when people make comments or they private message you, I had a good answer because I'd already done it. So that was something that's worked really well is I really promote real basic strength training. There's no bells and whistles at all. And it's squatting, it's pulling, it's pull-ups, it's pressing, it's real basic stuff. And I think the audience really appreciates it because it's real basic and it's real easy to follow.
Ed, what years were you with the Spurs?
98 to 2003.
So you were part of kind of that culture change with Popovich taking over?
Yeah, very much part of
Can you dive into that a little bit, just because that's kind of tying into all this?
All right. Pop really changed a lot, and he's got a lot more philosophy with him. It wasn't as much structure. I was part of the All Blacks team that won the 2011 World Cup as well, and the All Blacks back in 2007 had some pretty bad things happening. Players winding up drunk in the bushes, opposing team members from South Africa having to take them back to their hotel, a big drop from what they had expected of them. And they run pretty much parallel lines. Pop had a saying about a stone cutter. It was put up in it's a poem about a stone cutter banging on his rock, banging on the rock. You don't know if it's the 10th hit that's going to create what you want or if it's the 1,000th hit that's going to create what you want. The All Blacks put up a sign. They continue to bring the sign around everywhere, even in Chicago when they came just a few weeks ago, and the sign simply says, "No dickheads." That's it. They began changing. Pop, when he came in, he got rid of some older players that were head cases. Vernon Maxwell, who, every titty bar in town, he would get thrown out of. Other ones like that. He brought in guys with attitude. My first year, we brought in a guy named Mario Ellie. Mario Ellie's job was to make David Robinson stand up straight. David didn't play with passion. David played because David grew 8 inches in his senior year in high school and went on to the Naval Academy. So he didn't play with a lot of the passion and the desire to just be the best. Mario Ellie came in, cussed everybody out, said he wasn't going to smile until we won a championship. I got a great picture in my office at my gym of Mario Ellie's first smile, because I basically walked into we were in one of the New York Rangers locker rooms. I was like, "Hey, motherfucker, you said you'd smile when we won a championship, so bitch, smile." Of course, I got in trouble with Avery Johnson, who said a prayer for me. Many times I woke up drunk on a belt cart during my first year. Yeah, he said a lot of prayers. But the All Blacks had a player that was the heir apparent. Anybody know anything about rugby? Okay, so Dan Carter's the greatest rugby player in history right now. This kid was going to be the heir apparent to Dan Carter after the 2011 World Cup, or 2015 World Cup, I'm sorry. He gets drunk and wakes up next to somebody that wasn't his wife, wasn't his partner. He's late for the team flight to come to the U.S., not this time, another time. Team looks, and the management of the team and the ones that decide are the players. It's the same thing Pop did. The players, the senior players, they make curfew. They make, punishment. They sent the kid home. Kid's never made the All Blacks again. Still plays professionally, but he'll never wear a black jersey. They always say, leave the black jersey in a better place. And she was talking about changing culture. There's a book called Legend that came out. I can find who wrote it pretty quick by looking it up. But that was their culture change. It was pretty much listed out how they changed it, what they brought in. But then Pop ran parallel with that. And the same thing, just they don't allow disruption. If you're disruptive, you're gone. We had a really good player, Derek Anderson, played at Kentucky. He was sponsored by Jordan's Shoes Jumpman. Derek decided that he was going to negotiate his next contract in the news media. Big no-no with Pop. A conspiracy theory nut. Big no-no. Derek Anderson was gone. That's simple. He just doesn't play, and he's got good because he's got the blessing of the team ownership too. So whatever Pop says, Peter Holtz does. And like talking about the strength coach that we talked about, you never know which Pop you're going to get either though. So some days you're walking down the hallway. It's a little narrow hallway where we're at, in the Alamo Dome. And some days he'd say hi to you. Some days he'd put his head down and just keep walking. Kind of take offense to it at first, and then I realized that his degree is in Russian studies from the Air Force Academy. If he wouldn't have been coaching, he was going to be a mole for the U.S. government within the Soviet system. Like, there's something mentally wrong with you, guy. But he and I really connected well when he found out that I had one of my undergraduate degrees is in philosophy. Don't know why. Can't really get a job with it. But that degree, Aaron and I talked, that degree in philosophy helps me coach. Because I motivate a lot of kids that don't want to be there all the time. Trying to keep them honest, trying to keep them going, trying to get them to some spoiled little rich kids that I have in Houston now, trying to get them, accountable. Oh, but I don't have to, they go to school. I got one kid that's at one private school, there's probably 40 people in the whole school. He shows up when he wants, does this. No, you show up at this time. And I'm real big on that. So they're real big with the rules, but the senior team is what makes the rules. David Robinson made the rules. Tim Duncan was a superstar. He was in his second year when I was there. Timmy didn't make the rules. David Robinson made the rules until David left. Avery Johnson made the rules. That's just the way it is. And the All Blacks do the same thing. Legacy,
So, speaking of integrity, accountability, passion, all that stuff, who do you guys look to? Who do you read? Who do you talk to? Where do you get your inspiration?
For me, I've got a pretty good network of I think colleagues and stuff in the field that obviously do a lot of writing or do a lot of things that I kind of get constant daily, see things that they do, which is great. I think some of the books, I really built that 4-pillar philosophy off of another book, which was 4 Pillars of a Man's Heart by Stu Weber. And it was talking about, you want to be strong as there's 4 pillars. It was king, warrior, mentor, and friend. So I kind of took those traits of what I wanted to do and then apply it to being a coach. So when I built that philosophy, which was 2008 or 9, I built it with someone that we put a lot of time in before we just threw it out there. And we really wanted to create, instead of creating a manual of all these things that we wanted in a strength program, we said, why not do an image? Let's build an image of a very similar to that book. And let's designate what's our prize, what do we want to be, what do we want to accomplish with it, and what are our 4 pillars and why. So we took a lot of time before we kind of designated those 4 pillars of faith and passion, mentor, and integrity. So I got a lot of that from that book. Read that book probably 6 or 7 times. That book reads different every time you do it because you're in a different stage of your life. I read it single, I read it married, I read it as a father, I read it as a father the second time with another child, and I read it when I was fired, and again, it reads different at different stages of your life, so it's really cool. Another great book for me that was early on was Coach K at Duke, his book Leading with the Heart, just really good on, he came from the military side and got into coaching, and his whole chapter on accountability is amazing. It'll raise the hairs up on the back of your neck on what he thinks about as far as accountability and those things. And it's just things like that have been, early influences. The Tony Dungy book, excellent book, just talking about, his process and how he had his process at Tampa Bay, but he got fired, but he just kept his process and he took it to the Colts, and he ended up winning a Super Bowl, and how he just trusted in his process, and then it paid off. And he didn't waver because the season went bad. He still stayed true to his program. So, great book. And then another one, I was trying to think of those that kind of fall into that, was I'm trying to think. I think that's good. You got some?
I've kind of really gotten blessed with a lot of my basic stuff comes from my career in the military. I spent 6.5 years as an Army Ranger. So a lot of it comes from that way. But when the guys that I grew up around, the older guys that mentored me, but now it's, I don't know, I really feel like I got blessed with Coach Popovich. But from Coach Popovich comes Peter Holt, that owns the Spurs, his family owns Caterpillar in the country. But he was really a great mentor, and that was the business side of it. A lot of other things that I find, I read books, but a lot of the books that I read aren't going to be on sports or sports figures. There's a book called Power, so is it 44, 49?
Of 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah, 48 Laws of Power. And yeah. He's got another one on war. It's almost like the art of war. It's almost like the art of war dumbed down. Because to read the art of war, you really have to understand. But I mean, when I went in the military, that was the one thing that kind of saved me, but it really did well. I advanced through the ranks pretty quickly. I ran my own detachment in the Army Rangers. It was a group of military police officers that were sent to Ranger School, and our job was to hunt certain people throughout the world, and that's what we did, was to bring them into custody and transfer them to prisons that didn't exist. So I was also on my own a lot, but you can't, I could turn in receipts. I could charge anything I wanted on the American Express card I had that booked me flights, that booked this, that booked that, but I still had to have that integrity there. So I got taught by officers above me about all of that. So military for me is what really kind of solidified that. So.
Yeah, as you guys might have told you guys, I was a rhetoric major, which people always ask me what a rhetoric major is. It's like an English philosophy degree with an argumentative approach. So, that'd be great. Yeah, it was perfect for me. I could argue about everything, but it was something where I got to read 20 to 30, 40 books a semester. So it was a perfect major for me in that I got to read books and read and write, and then get up and argue Socratic method. When you go into a class and they're like, okay, here it is. Did you guys read this? Okay, let's talk about it. And if you didn't read it or you tried to bullshit, they just threw you out, and then you were absent that day. And if you were absent 3 times, you failed the class. So I got to read, and I read everything from, Nietzsche to Marcus Aurelius, and that really set a foundation for me. As of late, as you guys know, it's become super interesting in that whenever somebody recommends a book to me, I usually buy it and read it. And we have this thing called Power Athlete Radio, which is this podcast, which I fucking bitch about, and I hate it. Because it always has to keep me there on a Thursday. Like, it always seems to be doing something on a Thursday, and then they're like randomly it comes in. But it's by far one of the most interesting things that I've done, in that it's created a really cool genealogy sphere of really networking, where I get to meet guys like this. And invariably, everybody always recommends a book. Like, we just had Tony Blauer on the other day, and I have a list, and people will, as soon what's the name of the book, and I write it down and I buy it. And when it comes through, I read it. And I'm waiting on the one from Tony Blauer, and I can't remember the name. But as of late, as you guys know, I have 3 kids. I've been reading things on fatherhood. especially about fathers and daughters. I grew up with brothers. Literally, there was no girls around. I mean, all my cousins, everybody was boys. There was no girls on our street. So, like, realistically, the first time I remember I went to the dorms, I remember I was in the shower and there was a girl in the shower next to me, and I was like, "Is that a girl over there?" I mean, it just wasn't really like, it was kind of a strange deal. So, having two little girls, twin daughters, and then also working in a job like the NFL where there are no women. I mean, I went to college, like, it's such a weird thing, like, not really even having coworkers as women until I really opened a gym. I mean, really, Callie was our first female coworker ever at Power Athlete and really at our gym. So that, to me, having daughters has been really very enlightening, challenging at least. So I've been reading a bunch of books on strong fathers, strong daughters. And yeah, like
Hand-to-hand combat.
yeah, but like there's a really good book, and I read it years ago, and I've actually read it several times. It's called Wild at Heart, and I cannot remember the author for the life of me as I'm sitting here trying to do it. But it's this idea that, you know, like as a father for not only your family but your daughters, like to see passion, and then to realize that daughters understand how they are to be treated by men based on the interaction between their mother and their father. So if the father treats the mother well, then the daughters learn that's how I should be treated. And so that is the weirdest thing, because now you're looking at it like your kids are watching you and they're always judging you. You know, like the joke with Wedding Crashers when he's like, look at the baby, watching, judging. It's your kids, and your daughters especially. Like, they look at dad and they see how mom, and so my wife and I had this conversation, and it's like, you know, there's never a point where we're not civil. Everything is this, like, you know, like there's always like, and not that you have to say these things because people get impassioned. Andy was talking about, you know, trying to have a rational conversation. My wife and I have like made this discerning deal to always do this, and you know, to show our little girls, you know, what it should look like. And you know, like my daughters know every morning, or most mornings, we get up early. They hear it. They hear probably the coffee grinder at like 5:30. And they know that dad goes to the gym, and then I come home, I take them to school, and we ride to the school, and like all of this stuff. And like they always ask, like they'll always be like, "Oh, dad, how was workout?" And they're like 5 years old. I was like, "It was good." It was terrible, but it's always good. And they know that dad gets up, and that's part of the deal. They know mom gets up and makes lunches. And like my daughter came home the other day, and the kids had been making fun of her and her sister because my wife actually makes them their lunches. Like there's meat and there's veggies and like everything's in these like perfect little tins. And my wife wakes up at like 5:30 to make these fucking lunches. And the kids were making fun of them because they eat Lunchables. And they were like, well, our stuff comes in plastic and it's way cooler than yours. So my daughters came home and they were like, they said our lunches aren't cool. I was like, let me explain to you what cool is. And like try to have these conversations with your kids. And the other thing that I took away from one of the books I read was don't ever shield your kids from anything. As parents, we always have this idea, like, I want to shield my children from stuff. But problem is that doesn't prepare them for anything. Like, we were somewhere and there was a guy who was literally hammered on the street corner, you know, panhandling, and the dude was literally absolutely shit-faced. And my daughter's like, what's wrong with him? I'm like, he's drunk. What's drunk? And I explained it to her, and she's like, well, why is he out there? Is it because he's drunk? And I'm like, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg, but literally talking to him about these things. And, you know, why are people successful? Why are other people? And the other big one, and I got this from China Cho's dad, Mr. Cho. So when I was having daughters, you know, as you guys know, I worked a lot with China, helped her rehab and get back and do some stuff and be a very successful athlete. And I always liked her dad. I liked how involved he is. Any of you guys that know Mr. Cho, he shows up to every event and takes literally 10,000 pictures. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, Luke, would you say it's 10,000? Yeah, 30,000. So he'll go to the CrossFit Games and takes 30,000 pictures over the course of like 2 days. And I remember at one point he was like, it's 60,000 over 4 days. He literally just hits his camera and he takes all these pictures and he loads them to the internet. Which I don't know how long that takes. Nobody knows. But I asked him, I was like, you know, if you could give one piece of advice, because his daughters are all super switched on, like went to college, all really strong, capable women, which I think is what, at least as a dad, you know, you want like your little girl to, you know, not be the damsel in distress. You know, you want them like to be capable and you know, willing to, you know, fight through the flames. He was like, you know, talk to them about college. People don't talk to their kids about college. He goes, there was never a point, and he always jokes, he's like, as an Asian parent, there is this weird sense of like this standard that they had to hold. And he goes, I remember they came home with a bad grade, and he goes, I fucking went ballistic. on purpose because I wanted them to know that like was unacceptable from day one. I figured if I stomped it out, and he joked and he called it Asian parent syndrome. But he literally talked to the kids from the time they were 3 and 4, like when you go to college, when you go to college, when you go to college. So the kids always grew up knowing they would go to college. Like, you got to go to college, get a job. So I literally talk to my daughters all the time. Where are you going to go to college? What are you going to do? And my daughters are most upset that they think that they're going to have to go away for college, and they're okay with it as long as mom and dad live next door. And they're like, but if we go to college, is Killy going to, Jamie and Killy, they're like, Killy's going to be there. I'm like, she'll be there. And they're like, are you guys going to live next door? And I was like, yeah, mom and dad are going to move and live next door to you guys in college. Like, okay, we'll be okay then.
So she can still make lunch.
Yeah, still make lunches. But like, that's the stuff, and you guys know this, is like you hear these things or you think back on your childhood, like the things that you remember are really interesting. Like my mom got up, like I still tell people the story, like every night I used to wake up at 3 a.m. because my dad was out there working on the typewriter. I mean, dude, and my dad's a lawyer. He does his billing. He's been an attorney for over 50 years. And literally he's almost 70 or he's 78 now and still practices 5-6 days a week. And I asked him, like, you ever retire? He's like, what am I going to do? He's like, I'll hang out at home with your mom and die. So he'll never retire. But literally, I remember as a little kid, like hearing the typewriter, and like literally having sleepovers with our buddies, and people being like, "What's that fucking noise? Is there a ghost?" I'm like, "No, it's my dad on the typewriter. He's doing his billing." And my dad sleeps like 3 or 4 hours a night, and he works. He's always worked. That's all he's ever done. That's all he knows. So I grew up assuming that's what everybody does. And then when I went to college, I'd come home and practice, eat, go to bed, and I'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning because my dad would call me every morning, 3 or 4 in the morning, to wake me up to study. It's like, what's going on? I'm doing my billing. What are you doing? I'm like, I'm up studying. What's good? Let's talk for a few minutes. And like that was that type of influence. And so here I am at 40 raising my own kids. And these memories are literally as crisp as I can ever remember because they were so influential on what I had. It was just like, what do you mean we don't go to college? What do you mean we don't go hard work? What do you mean? And, there's a reason that, my other brothers are lawyers and everybody has gone on and done something is because the standard got set really early. There was never a point where, we came home and I think I told you guys the funny story about my mom. I started fighting in martial arts when I was pretty young and boxing. And I was in junior high school, and an older kid chews me off. And I was like the really first time I'd ever really been in like a non-fight with my brothers. I mean, neighborhood, wrestling matches or something. But this older kid, I'm like 6th grade, maybe 7th, like 6, right around there. Older kid like pushes me, and it's like a confrontation. So I was so nervous I didn't even drop my backpack, but I literally cracked this dude like 3 times in the face. I mean, he didn't know how to fight. He thought we were going to kid fight. He didn't know that I boxed and actually knew to throw hands. So I laced this kid. And teachers come out as he's laying there bloodied up and take us to the principal's office. And so, we're sitting out there. They call our parents. So my mom comes down there because my mom is like, as you guys have not had the luxury of meeting my mom, but she's an intense woman. So my mom speeds down there, fucking tears into the parking lot, walks up to me, just storms in and goes, what happened? So I told her, and she was like, hold on. Walks in the principal's office and literally gives this dude more. He wanted to talk to her about it. My mom's like, what the fuck are you calling me for? Your inability to do the job. My mom laces the principal. Walks out and goes, come on. And so we walk out. My mom looks at me and she's like, I'll never be mad at you if you fight. I'm only gonna be mad at you if you lose. And if you lose, you can't come home. And we got in the car and went out. And so ever since then, I always thought, like, if I get in a fight, I better win, because if I can't go home. And so when I would go in high school or college in the NFL, whenever anything would happen, I would always get this little sense of nervousness, and I'd go out there and literally have no problems dropping or fighting or doing anything. But and I remember Andy Reid asked my mom once outside the game. He made a big point. He's like, I've never seen anybody go that hard, or more importantly, be that violent that quick. And my mom was insulted. And she called Andy Reid out. She's like, why would you think my son would be anything different? And my mom is literally giving Andy Reid a load of shit like she did that principal. And he was kind of taken back. I'm head coach of Philadelphia Eagles, so I'm general manager. And there's my mom fucking talking trash to him. And he leaves, and I see him a couple days later, and he's like, I met your mom. I was like, yeah.
I still got a job.
He's like, she's a pretty intense woman. And I was like, you have no fucking idea. So but that's how I grew up. And, there's a reason why you go out and you do the things you do, and it's, I think, as a parent, as a mentor and all these things, I mean, you have the opportunity to influence somebody, and you guys that are parents or in gyms or work with kids like Ed and stuff, you have an obligation. And what's so cool is that my talk actually ties in with all these, thank God, the idea of that social responsibility and understanding it, and those who have the power to do something are compelled to do it. And this whole seminar or symposium is about this knowledge is power and bringing in people that have really influenced me personally, but also we've had on the podcast and connected and been like, fuck, these are the rich experiences that hopefully, steer the boat and really, help drive a path to where we need it to go, which unfortunately isn't really happening so much anymore, but we're going to take the social responsibility to try to make it happen. So that's my hilarious mom.